Do you believe that a cat can bring a soul back from the dead? Would you dare to hold the corpse of a black cat that just died by the roadside and take it home on a rainy night? That night, the rain poured like a flood. The wind howled through the trees lining Dongtan village, sounding like someone crying in the middle of the night. Fuang, a 22-year-old girl, had just finished her part-time shift. On her way home, riding her bike across a small bridge over a dry canal, she saw something curled up on the wet grass. It was a black cat, soaked to the bone, blood seeping from its neck. Its eyes were wide open but clouded over, as if it had died long ago. She stopped, her heart skipped a beat. For some reason, she knelt down, gently picked up the cat's body, wrapped it in her raincoat, and continued riding toward the narrow alley that led to her house. In her arms, even though it was dead, the cat still felt warm, and, every now and then, it trembled slightly. That night, in Fuang's small room, the rain still fell. The wind rattled through the window slats. She placed the cat in a cardboard box, lined it with a towel. She lit an incense stick and bowed 3 times. If you still have ties to this world, I'll help. If you're just a creature, I'll return you to the earth. Then she turned off the light, closed her eyes. But when the clock hit 2:17 a.m., a strange sound echoed from the corner of the room. Meow, a cat's cry, but not from the box. It was right behind her. Fuang jolted. She turned around sharply. No one was there. No cat either. Just the box sitting still on the corner of the table. The towel was neatly folded, untouched. She took a deep breath. Maybe I'm too tired, so tired I imagined the sound. Trying to reassure herself, Fuang pulled the blanket over her head, but inside the pillow she was lying on, something rustled. Very softly, but enough to raise goosebumps. Fuang sat up, gently unzipped the side of the pillowcase. A foul, fishy smell hit her nose. She reached inside, felt something damp and soft, then fur, then a slimy lump of raw flesh. Matted with cat hair, she screamed, threw the pillow into the middle of the room. Strangely, inside the pillow was nothing. No fur, no blood, nothing at all, just an empty pillow. But Fuang's hands still carried the stench. The next morning, Fuang told her foster mother. The woman didn't say anything at first, just stayed silent, then calmly asked, "You brought its body home, didn't you?" "Yes, I felt sorry for it. It died and no one cared." "A black cat, under the bridge?" "Yes. How did you know?" She stood up, stared out into the garden, her face pale. "Cow Rach Mon, someone died there before. When they died, they were holding a black cat. The village says a vengeful spirit possessed the cat. Anyone who brings it home gets followed." Fuang felt a chill run down her spine. The woman said, about 15 years ago, a teacher named Wei went missing. They only found her bike and a handkerchief by the bridge. No body. Only a black cat kept lingering in the area. People said she had been murdered. And her anger entered the cat. Everyone who kept it died. One old man kept it for 3 days. He died seizing in the kitchen. A child locked it in a box, found dead the next morning. An old lady buried it. Her kitchen was burned down in a fire. Fuang didn't know what to believe, but strange things kept happening. The box with the cat, even though buried carefully behind the house, had scratch marks around it every morning. The burial towel, left in the box, vanished, and was found on Fuang's desk. The cat was dead, but her hair began falling out more and more. She often sat blankly for hours in front of the mirror, unable to remember what she was even thinking about. That night, it rained again. The wind moaned through the window. Fuang locked the door, lit incense at her desk and whispered, "I didn't mean to. If you have resentment, please don't enter me." But as soon as she turned around, she saw her reflection in the mirror, still looking back. And smiling, even though she, her real self, wasn't smiling at all. Then the sound of a cat meowing came from under the bed. This time, not one, but many. Meow, meow, meow. She dropped to the floor, trembling. Under the bed, nothing. But behind her, a black cat leapt onto her back, scratched along. Bloody line down her spine. The smell of blood surged up her nose. Fuang fainted. The next morning, her foster mother opened the door, found Fuang lying on the floor. Eyes wide open, face pale. On her back, 3 claw marks. Deep red, running from the nape of her neck to her waist. On the desk, a red string, and a note written in blood. Don't bury me when the grievance is still unresolved. Fuang didn't remember how long she'd been unconscious. When she woke up, it was still dark, but the rain had stopped. The wind too. No sound, except for her own heart pounding in her chest. The room was freezing. Her back still burned, where the long claw mark ran from her neck down to her waist like a warning carved into her skin. She looked around. The cat's box was still there, but the burial towel was gone. No one could have come into the room. The door was still locked. Everything looked untouched, but the feeling that something else was there, something present, made it impossible for her to sleep again. The next morning, Fuang woke up early. Her eyes were dark with fatigue, her head dizzy. She didn't tell her adoptive mother what had happened the night before. Silently, she carried the box into the garden, dug a hole, and carefully buried the cat under the old mango tree behind the house. The wind rustled through the leaves, whispering like someone breathing cold words. She turned to walk away, unaware that in the middle of the freshly buried soil, there was a single cat paw print, clear and deep, as if pressed down while the dirt was still wet. That night, Fuang drifted off to sleep just past 9. She dreamed. In her dream, the house was no longer the same. Everything was gray. The walls were stained with blood. The floor damp and cold, reeking of burnt animal fur. She stood in the kitchen, but her mother was nowhere to be seen. All sound seemed to be sucked away. Suddenly, from the end of the hallway, a figure stepped out. A woman, wearing an old white ao dai, her long hair covering most of her face. But what made Fuang's blood run cold wasn't the hair, it was her face, with no eyes. 2 hollow, black sockets, blood trickling down from both temples. The woman held in her arms a black cat, the same cat Fuang had buried. Her lips moved, no sound, but Fuang understood every word. Don't bury me. Then she vanished into the darkness. Fuang jolted awake, cold sweat soaking her back. The clock read 3:13 a.m. Outside the window, not a breeze, but the wardrobe door was wide open. She couldn't remember ever opening it. The next day, something strange happened in the village. Mrs. Hao, the neighbor next door, discovered 3 roosters in her coop had been killed during the night. Their necks torn open, no dog tracks, no blood trail. The co-op door was still locked. But the terrifying part was, beside the dead chickens was a piece of red fabric embroidered in white thread with the word, Fuang. She trembled as Mrs. Hao brought it over to ask. Looking closely, it was fabric from an old shirt Fuang used to wear in 10th grade. Long thrown away. That night, Fuang sat alone in her room, trying to sketch the face of the eyeless woman from her dream. She didn't know why she was doing it. Her hand moved as if guided by someone else. In just minutes, the face appeared on paper. Long hair, empty eyes, blood dripping, and at the bottom corner of the sheet, in handwriting that wasn't hers, there was a line. Wei, kindergarten class B. Fuang gasped. The name, Wei, was familiar. It was the name of the teacher who went missing 15 years ago, the one her mother had once mentioned. Along with the cursed black cat, she rummaged through her adoptive mother's old veterinary files. In a drawer, she found a time-worn notebook. On the first page, it read, "If you slip, keep its eyes." The next page was a drawing of a trap. In the center was the black cat, its eyes red like blood. Fuang looked up and froze. On the glass door of her room, there was a faint handprint, like someone had just pressed it from the outside. But her room was on the 2nd floor. No one could possibly stand outside. She tiptoed closer, trembling, and slowly opened the window. No one, but when she turned around, she saw that the drawing of the eyeless woman had moved. The image was flipped upside down, and behind it was a line of blood. "I haven't been buried. I'm still here." The next morning, Fuang's adoptive mother was in a panic. A long red claw mark was etched into the downstairs door. She immediately locked all the cats in the coop and sprinkled salt around the house. Fuang was forced to stay home from work, only allowed to sit in her room, burning incense and chanting. But the more she chanted, the louder a voice echoed inside her head, whispering, groaning, "Don't believe her, she killed me. She burned my body in the animal incinerator behind the house." Fuang's knees buckled. She rushed down to the old shed, where her mother used to practice veterinary work. Beneath a pile of broken bricks, She found the old incinerator, covered with a tarp. She pulled it away, and the stench that hit her made her vomit. The smell of ashes, burned flesh, and hair. On the inner wall of the furnace, scratched in with a fingernail, was the message, "Phuong, don't let her burn me again." Phuong stumbled back. On the stairs, she saw the black cat. Who knows how long it had been standing there, its eyes glowing red, tongue hanging out, standing on a torn piece of paper. She bent down to pick it up when suddenly, it leapt onto her shoulder, scratched a line across the back of her neck. Blood poured. Just before she passed out, she heard a whisper in her ear. "You have to remember, you witnessed it too, with your own eyes." Phuong woke up in a hospital room, her limbs gently restrained. The doctor said she had scratched her own neck. Her adoptive mother sat beside her bed, eyes dark and silent. The room door was shut, but on the glass, there were cat paw prints, and 2 bloody words, freshly written, "You're next." Phuong was discharged after 2 days under observation. She couldn't clearly remember what had happened. All she knew was that her neck still burned from the scratch. And her adoptive mother had become strangely silent. The whole way back from the clinic, the woman didn't say a single word. Her face was pale, her eyes sunken from lack of sleep. As they reached the gate, she suddenly turned around, looked Phuong straight in the eyes, and spoke in a hoarse voice, "If anything strange happens again, don't ask me. And don't tell anyone, do you hear me?" Phuong nodded, though her heart was full of confusion. Night fell. Her room remained the same, but it no longer felt safe. Every time she looked in the mirror, her eyes would blur, like she was peering into murky water. Sometimes, the reflection would smile, though she herself was breathless with fear. The burial cloth for the cat, which she thought had been buried, reappeared on her doorknob, neatly folded, spotless, as if freshly washed. She began to suspect that the cat wasn't just a dead animal. It was trying to contain a soul within, or worse, it was a shell. A vessel, for someone trying to return. On Tuesday night, Phuong quietly got up at midnight. She brought a candle and crept into the backyard, to the spot where she had buried the cat. She remembered clearly, she had covered the grave with care. But under the candlelight, the ground was now flat. No marks, no sinking, no mounds, as if nothing had ever been buried there. Trembling, she reached down and scratched at the dirt, and touched something cold and hard. It was a name tag, half burned, the letters, scribbled in a child's handwriting. Ms. Wei, Kindergarten Class B. At that moment, a fierce wind blew, even though the sky was clear. From within the bushes came a sound, not a cat's meow, but something more, like someone whispering. Phuong covered her face and ran back inside. But when she turned on the light, she froze. On the wall, someone had written in charcoal, over and over, "I'm not a cat. I'm human. I was murdered." Panicked, Phuong ran downstairs to wake her mother. But the woman was fast asleep. Completely unaware, she shook her, called her name, again and again, until she suddenly noticed her mother's arm was ice cold. But not from death. On her hand were tiny bite marks, bleeding, as if someone, or something, had gnawed on her fingers while she slept. The next morning, Phuong visited old Madame Tu, the keeper of the abandoned cemetery at the edge of the village. The old woman was nearly blind in one eye, but remembered the past as if it had just happened. When she heard the name Ms. Wei and the black cat at Rachemon Bridge, she took a long drag of her cigarette and rasped, "Don't call it a cat anymore. Dear, it's no longer a cat. It's a container, a shell for a vengeful soul to live in. It already came back once before. But they burned it." The hatred never faded. Phuong shivered. "Who burned it?" she asked. The old woman didn't answer. She just shook her head and said, "The fire wasn't strong enough. The one who burned it was guilty. A guilty flame can't destroy a cursed spirit. You understand?" Phuong bit her lip. Her mind cracked with the sound of shattering memories. She remembered, when she was little, one night, she woke up to the sound of screaming out back. She was around 7 years old. She once saw her mother dragging a large sack from the animal cages to the furnace. In the dim light, she had glimpsed a human arm sticking out of the sack. But the next morning, her mother told her it was just a dead dog, and she believed it, too young to understand. Now that memory rushed back like a storm. Phuong began to piece everything together, and she knew the spirit inside the cat wanted her to remember. wanted her to realize that she had witnessed it, too, and stayed silent. That night, Fuang experienced sleep paralysis, but not the usual kind. She was pinned down by cold claws. Each scratch felt like it burned through her skin. When she finally broke free, her body was soaked in sweat. But the most terrifying part was the rope tied loosely around her neck, as if someone had once tried to tighten it. On the floor, strands of long, black hair were scattered, soaked in the metallic stench of blood. She screamed, but the door was locked from the inside. Her mother banged on it from outside. When she finally broke in, she found Fuang collapsed, her hands trembling, her mouth repeating one sentence over and over. "Not a cat, not a cat, she's human, it's her." Her mother finally became afraid. She lit incense all over the house, called for a shaman, but the moment the spiritual master stepped through the main door, before he could perform any ritual, he collapsed on the porch. Mumbling incoherently, on his forehead were 3 deep, bloody claw marks, like cat scratches, but far too large to belong to a cat. Fuang stood at the second-floor window. Her eyes were red. In her hand was a drawing of the eyeless face, smiling. And in the shadows behind her, a black figure, with a tail, walking on 2 human legs. Ever since the spiritual master collapsed on the porch, Fuang's adoptive mother had been on the brink of madness. She wouldn't leave Fuang's side. All day long she muttered prayers, or were they curses, as she burned incense, lit paper offerings, and scattered salt around the house. When Fuang asked about it, her mother snapped, "I told you not to mess with it. Now it's following you. If you want peace, shut your mouth." But how could there be peace? Fuang began seeing things no one else could. She saw a woman in a white-out dye standing inside the mirror every time she looked into it. Not a reflection, but someone inside, staring directly at her, eyeless. Each night, the woman moved closer. Fuang no longer dared look into her mirror. She covered it with a blanket. But blankets can't cover the past. She began to dream of the old room, the storage shed in the backyard, where the animal furnace was kept. In the dream, someone dragged a body across the floor, blood trailing along the bricks. Then came a scream. That scream, it was the voice of the teacher. It was Ms. Wei. Fuang couldn't take it anymore. One night, she crept down to the shed. She opened the old boxes one by one and found a small wooden chest, bound with a tarnished copper wire. No key, but as if guided by something, she gently pried one side open. The lid popped up. Inside was a journal, old, yellowed with age, but the writing was still clear. The handwriting trembled, messy and uneven. The first line read, "My name is Wei. If you found this, it means I'm dead. Please, don't bury me. I was burned alive." Fuang's hands trembled. She turned the page. Between 2 lines was a smaller scrawl. "She caught me when I tried to report her for injecting tranquilizers into the dogs to collect sponsorship money. She said if I spoke up, I'd disappear." I didn't believe her, until she locked me in with the animals and set the fire. Fuang was frozen. That woman, the one she had called mother for nearly 20 years, burned a living person? Just to cover up her dirty business? She flipped to the last page. The writing looked like it was written in blood. "I didn't die. I'm in the cat. I've been waiting to speak. And you, Fuang, you were the little girl who looked through the door slit and walked away." Fuang collapsed. She remembered that rainy night long ago. She had snuck out looking for her mother. She remembered the desperate crying from the furnace, the flickering light, and she remembered an eye, a human eye, staring at her through the small opening in the door. Back then, she had run away, told no one, saved no one. Fuang knelt on the floor of the shed, shaking and sobbing. She had never imagined she was the one who stood by as a soul was condemned. At that very moment, the sound of cats crying echoed from outside the window. Not one, but many, screeching, as if calling for vengeance. She rushed to the backyard. The mound where the cat had once been buried was now sunken, soaked, and on the soil were not just cat prints, but also human footprints. Bare, small, long, as if someone had walked out from the grave. Her adoptive mother appeared, standing behind her. Her eyes were bloodshot from sleepless nights. Her hands shook, holding a kerosene lamp. She asked, "You read it, didn't you?" Fuang didn't answer. The woman gritted her teeth and hissed, I killed her because she was going to destroy our whole family. I begged her, but she threatened to go to the police. I just wanted her gone. But I didn't know she wouldn't leave. She broke down crying. For the first time, Fuang saw her completely fall apart. Her aged face, once full of pride, now hollow and defeated. Just a woman who made a terrible choice, and was being dragged to hell by the past. Fuang trembled. "So, the curse is real?" she whispered. Her mother nodded. "I sealed her and the cat, using a blood charm, but it wasn't enough. The charm binds, it doesn't cleanse. Now that you've opened it, I can't hold it back anymore." That night, Fuang didn't sleep. She lay in bed, opened Ms. Wei's journal one last time. There was a thin piece of paper folded tightly in the back cover. A handwritten incantation. At the top, in slanted red ink, it said, "Only the one who witnessed it can break the curse. You must look into my eyes, even if they no longer exist." Fuang shivered. Look into the eyes of a soul, even if there were no eyes left? Did that mean she had to face the spirit itself? At midnight, the mirror in her room shattered. From the other side of the broken glass, a voice whispered, "Don't be afraid, you remember now. And now, it's time to give my eyes back." Fuang screamed in horror, clutching her face. But then, she gradually calmed down. She no longer wanted to run. She couldn't keep running from the darkness she had once silently witnessed. For the first time, Fuang stood up and whispered through her tears, "If I'm the one who opened the curse, then I'll be the one to end it." She put on a white out dye, brushed her hair, and stepped out into the night. Her face was eerily calm. But in her hand, she held the blood-stained journal and the red cord that had once been tied around the cat's neck. Behind her, a shadow followed closely. A black cat, that was no longer a cat, and a woman, who was no longer human. 3 a.m. The house was as cold as ice. No wind, no ticking clock. Everything was still, except for Fuang's trembling breaths, like they were being crushed within her own familiar space. The eyeless woman's face reappeared. Closer, clearer. This time, she raised her hand and clawed a deep slash into Fuang's chest. Fuang jolted awake in the middle of the night, but the shirt she wore was torn open. Across her chest were 3 deep, bruised claw marks, like an animal's. There was no time to think, no time to process. She ran out of her room and turned on the light, but the bulb flickered a few times, then went out. In the hallway, there was a clicking sound. Someone, or something, was moving. No footsteps, just a soft scraping sound, like claws dragging across tile. Fuang grabbed a flashlight from the drawer. Its trembling beam scanned the wall. Beneath the stairs was a bloody handprint. Small, long, not from an adult. She stepped closer. On the wall, someone had drawn a circle in blood. Inside it, 3 straight lines, just like the claw marks on her chest. She froze. This wasn't just fear. It was a sign, a mark of someone about to die. The next morning, panic spread through the village. A child in the neighborhood, Hang's son, woke up with stomach pain. Then vomited blood. When his mother lifted his shirt, she found 3 dark purple claw marks across his back. No one knew where they came from. Hang rushed him to the clinic. But before they could even start the car, the boy convulsed and stopped breathing. The village was in chaos. Some whispered it was Trung Tang. Others blamed wild animals. But Fuang knew. It wasn't the curse of the dead passed down. It wasn't an animal. It was a curse repeating itself. Just like what had happened after Ms. Wei's death. Anyone who touched the cat, or even looked into its eyes, was marked. Fuang returned home and searched through Ms. Wei's journal. One page had been torn halfway. Beneath a smear of dried blood was a single line. Marked 3 times, "Your soul will be dragged down. No way back." She examined her own body. The scratch on her chest, that was the second. The first was when the cat leapt onto her back in the beginning. If what the journal said was true, she only had 1 mark left before her soul would be taken. She couldn't sit still. She went to find old Madame Tu, the cemetery keeper. But when she arrived, the gate was wide open. The main door, smashed. Inside, a trail of blood led from the altar to the back door. Madame Tu was gone. No one knew where she had gone. Only a half-burned charm remained on the floor, and a tailless black cat lay dead. Its eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Fuang nearly lost her mind. She returned home and began redrawing every symbol from Ms. Wei's journal. She tried to piece together what had been torn out. Then, she discovered a coded passage, written in ancient Han characters, hidden among the final notes. The blood mark is the final seal. Break the mark, and the person may be saved. But it must be traded with an innocent soul. An innocent soul? That meant a blameless person? Someone had to die in her place? She froze in fear. The curse didn't just force her to face death. It forced her to choose, save herself, or save someone else. That night, Fuang's adoptive mother packed her things and left without a word. Before she left, she placed a note on Fuang's desk. If you want to live, don't stop me. This must end. Along with it was an old photo, Ms. Wei standing beside a small child. It was Fuang. At age 3, she stared at the picture, then turned her head. The black cat was lying on the bed, but it was no longer a cat. Its shadow grew taller, stretched longer, eyes glowing red, mouth twisted, oozing blood. It stood on 2 legs and scratched into the wall. The third time will be the blood moon. Fuang collapsed to the floor, hands over her chest, heart pounding wildly. The blood moon was only 2 nights away. If she couldn't break the curse, she'd be next. Or, she'd have to find an innocent to take her place. But, was she even innocent anymore? The moon rose. The second night before the blood moon. The air in Dongtan village grew strangely heavy. Roosters crowed off schedule. Dogs howled in rhythm with the wind. Children began waking in terror, screaming in their sleep, crying out in nightmares no one could explain. One said a woman was pulling their legs from under the bed. Another drew on the wall the face of a teacher with no eyes. Fuang didn't sleep. She sat at her desk, gripping the old red bead rosary Madame Tu once gave her, her pale face etched with despair. In front of her was Ms. Wei's journal, every page memorized. But still, no complete answer. It was like the solution wasn't in the words, but in her memory. And then, right as the clock struck 3:13 a.m., her bedroom door swung open. No wind, no person, but on the cold tiled floor, bloody paw prints appeared, wet and blurred, leading toward the back, toward the old shed, where the animal furnace was. Fuang grabbed her flashlight, clutching the key Madame Tu had called the second seal. It was rusted, but she brought it anyway. She walked alone down the familiar path, each step like it was falling into nothingness. The grass no longer green. The earth held no scent. Everything seemed covered in ash, as if this place had never lived again since the night fire rose, and the woman named Wei was burned alive behind muffled screams. The shed door creaked open. Its rusted hinges cried like they remembered. Inside the dark, the furnace stood, corroded, cold, but strangely, its door was wide open. Someone, or something, had just used it. Fuang shone her light inside, and her heart nearly stopped. On the inside wall of the furnace, a handprint, a smear of blood dragged outward, like someone tried to crawl out, but never made it. On the floor were scorched writings, a mix of Vietnamese and a language no one could read anymore. But in the ashes, she saw a scrap of white silk, embroidered with a name, Wei. She staggered backward. Then the furnace let out a groan, as if someone was still alive inside. The groan turned to a whisper. Fuang, Fuang, are you going to let me die again? Fuang clenched her teeth and ran forward. She placed her hand on the furnace wall, not caring as rust sliced her skin and blood seeped from her fingers. But just then, the furnace slammed shut. Behind her, footsteps echoed, not heavy, not soft, but clearly human. She turned. It was her adoptive mother. But her face was no longer the same. Wrinkled, sunken eyes. In her hand, a glass jar. Inside, a handful of burned, long hair. If you want to live, stay quiet, the woman said. This furnace is a seal. If you open it, she won't spare anyone in this village. Fuang screamed. She's not a ghost. She was a person, someone you burned alive. You thought it ended there? The woman let out a dry, bitter laugh. I begged her, but she wanted me to confess. To pay. I couldn't, so I burned her, but she didn't leave. You think I'm afraid because she's a spirit? I'm afraid because she remembers. Every detail, every name, including you. You were there. You saw. You said nothing. Those words struck Fuang like a dagger. She stumbled back, hearing again the crackle of fire. The muffled cries. The sobs of the little girl she once was. The memory crashed back. Clear. Raw. Fuang screamed. She lunged at the furnace, unlocking it with the key, ignoring her adoptive mother as she yanked her hair, scratched her face, screamed like a madwoman. The furnace burst open, and from within, ashes swirled like smoke. A slender figure stepped out. Thin, wearing a scorched white ao dai. No hair, no eyes, but human. It was Wei. She stood between mother and daughter. The wind rose. Incense burned on its own. She said nothing, only raised her hand and drew 3 circles of blood in the air. Then placed her hand gently on Fuang's shoulder. You've remembered? You dared to open the door? You deserve to hear the truth. She turned to the mother. And you, from now on, you lose your voice. You'll live 3 more years. Every night, you'll hear the sound of me burning again. Then you'll die the same way you killed another. Fuang's mother screamed, clutching her throat, collapsing to the ground. She could no longer speak. Fuang could only hold her head, fall to her knees, tears streaming down her face. But Wei didn't disappear. She sat beside Fuang, her eyeless hand gently touching the girl's forehead. One night remains. If you don't choose, the fire will burn you instead. Fuang fainted. When she woke up, it was morning. Her mother lay unconscious in the corner, voiceless. And on Fuang's arm, a new scratch had appeared. The 3rd mark had come. Rain fell, not heavy, but steady and endless, like someone crying throughout the day. Gray clouds loomed over Dongtan village. Everyone walked with their heads down, silent. No one knew why so many had died lately. They only whispered, a demon cat is looking for a soul to replace. Fuang sat curled on the porch. On her wrist, the 3 claw marks had turned dark purple, swollen, burning like flames beneath the skin. She didn't dream anymore. She didn't need to, because what once appeared only in nightmares now stood before her in reality. Inside the house, her mother lay on the bed, eyes blank, mouth frozen, silenced. Since that night at the furnace, she hadn't spoken a word. Every night, she convulsed, whimpered, and cried out from her throat, as if reliving the screams of the woman she had once burned alive. Fuang felt no pity, only cold, so very cold. 3 claw marks. 3 days left. Today was the 3rd. In the stillness, the wind chime at the door suddenly rang. There was no breeze, but it moved. Fuang turned her head. On the doorstep stood a strange woman, face covered in a white scarf, holding a cradle. No one knew who she was. She said nothing, only placed the cradle at the door, then vanished. Like she had never existed. Fuang looked inside. A black kitten, fur soft as silk, eyes red as blood. Around its neck, a necklace. The pendant, a photo of Wei. Fuang screamed and kicked the cradle away. But the cat didn't make a sound. It stood up, walked into the yard, and turned to look at her. Its empty gaze seemed to ask, choose, die, or replace. She ran. For the first time in her life, Fuang ran from the house that had caged her for 20 years. She ran past the market, the school, the rice fields, every place tied to her childhood. But wherever she went, she saw a figure in a white ao dai, back turned, hair long and loose. Always beside her feet, a black cat. There was no escape, no one to help her. At night, she sought out a famous spiritual master, Hai Veen, the one who had saved people cursed by spirits. After hearing her story, he only shook his head. This is no longer a restless soul. This is karmic fate. You weren't just marked because you saw it, but because you stayed silent when you should have spoken. If you want to live, you must return her eyes. Her eyes, Fuang whispered, but she doesn't have eyes anymore. Then find where they were taken, return them, and let her see through you. If she finds even a flicker of light inside you, she'll forgive. If not, you will no longer be yourself. Fuang returned home that night, shattered. She entered the shed, searched through every old item. Beneath the furnace, she found a sealed brick compartment, covered with cement. She chipped away. Blood oozed from her hand. The brick cracked. Inside, a small wooden box. She opened it. On one side, 2 shriveled, blackened eyes. On the other, a photograph. Wei and her mother, smiling together. She broke down. That woman once loved her. She once loved her too. But that love was built on the unjust death of someone else. Now, Fuang had to pay. No one else could. She placed the box of eyes on the small altar, lit incense, and called out Wei's name. If you want, then look. Look deep. See if there's anything left in me worth forgiving. The wind rose. The room turned icy cold. The lights went out. The mirror shattered. And from within the shards, Wei stepped out. She was no longer burning, no longer screaming, just a woman. A woman who had once been betrayed. She stood in silence, held out her hand. Fuang closed her eyes, returned both eyes. She didn't cry anymore. She simply whispered, "If you can't forgive me, I accept that too." Silence, long as eternity. Then, a voice cracked the stillness. "You are not like your mother." The light flicked back on. Fuang collapsed to the floor, fainted. The next morning, her adoptive mother regained consciousness. She could speak again, but her hair had turned completely white. Fuang remained unconscious, but on her wrist, the 3 claw marks had vanished. Only one thing remained, a red message, etched across the altar. "The choice is made, but the debt remains. We meet again, on the blood moon." Dawn broke, but the sun did not rise. The sky hung gray like ash. No wind, no birds. The entire village of Dong Tan lay in a silence, as if even heaven and earth were holding their breath. Inside Fuang's house, Mrs. Cao, the medium known for summoning wandering souls, was preparing the ritual. She said, "I'm not calling to banish. I'm calling to listen, to hear what the spirit wants. If it agrees, it will leave. If not, there must be blood in exchange." Fuang sat beside her, her face pale, eyes filled with fear, but no longer running. She had accepted it, whether it would be death or forgiveness. It all depended on this final calling. On the altar, a bowl of chicken blood, 3 red incense sticks, and a black and white photo of Wei. The eyes in the photo slashed. Mrs. Cao began chanting. The wooden bell echoed, slow and steady. The first 3 strikes, nothing happened, but on the 4th, the wind rose. The windows slammed shut. The lights went out. Incense flared. The bowl of blood began to boil, as if a fire had lit beneath the table. The photo trembled. Then, whoosh, it caught fire, burned to ash. Silence again, but no spirit appeared. No cat's cry, no pale figure. Everything stood still, as if nothing had happened at all. Mrs. Cao froze. Strange, it refuses to show itself. She turned to Fuang, suspicious eyes narrowing. "Are you sure you're not hiding anything? Some secret you, or your mother, hasn't revealed?" Fuang bit her lip, shook her head. "I told you everything." But from the corner of the room, where her mother sat in silence, there was a crash. The bowl of porridge in her hands fell to the ground. Her eyes widened, mouth trembled. "No, it can't be." Mrs. Cao shouted. "What do you see? Speak now. It's standing behind you." Fuang's mother burst into tears, dropped to her knees. I didn't mean to. I didn't know she was pregnant." The air froze. Fuang stood still, like death itself. "Ms. Wei was pregnant?" Her voice cracked. Her mother nodded, hands trembling as she pointed to the wooden cabinet in the storage room. "Inside, there's her prenatal record. I kept it. I was going to burn it, but I was afraid the fire wouldn't burn that paper." Fuang sprang up, ran down to the shed, opened the cabinet. In the far back corner, a stack of old papers tied with a rubber band. Her hands shook as she pulled it out. A medical record. Name: Nguyen T. Wei. Gestational age: 8 weeks. Fuang collapsed to the ground. Her heart shattered. A woman, carrying a tiny life inside her, murdered and burned. And that child, never given a name, never given a chance to be born, burned with its mother, as if it never existed. Now she understood why the spirit summoning failed. Because the spirit of Wei was no longer alone. The soul of an unborn child had become something else, a vengeful fetus. No one could call it. No one could banish it. Only one way remained: summon it with the blood of blood. Fuang lifted her head. "Mom," she said, "if you admitted what you did, she would leave." Her mother shook her head, crying without sound. I can't face it." Madame Cao stood up, swept the offerings off the altar. "There's no need to summon anymore. It doesn't want chicken blood or incense. It wants the truth. And if you keep hiding, not only will you die, your daughter won't survive either." Night fell. In the mirror, the figure of the woman returned. But this time, no flames, no white dress, just a mother, holding her belly, blood dripping from her arms, eyes hollow, but her voice, shaky, like a plea. I only wanted someone to remember my child. It had no name, no grave, no birth date, only fire. Fuang stood still. Then, with trembling hands, she wrote a name on a blank sheet of paper. Nok An, child of Wei. Folded it, placed it on the altar, lit incense, prayed in silence. Outside, the red moon began to rise. The air reeked of cold ash, and a raspy meow echoed from the furnace. The furnace door creaked open. No smoke, no fire. Inside, a white shawl, soaked in blood, and a tiny silver bracelet, engraved with the letter A. The child was still here, and it had not been forgiven. That night, the sky burned crimson. The blood moon rose high, its glow washing over the roof like dried blood. Fuang sat motionless on her bed, her eyes vacant, lips whispering words that made no sound. Her mother, after confessing, after sobbing quietly before the makeshift altar to Wei and her unborn child, had been lying down, silent, since dawn. But Fuang didn't sleep, didn't cry, didn't move. From the moment the shawl and silver bracelet fell from the furnace, something inside her had changed. Near midnight, the wind slammed against the windows. The red moonlight cast a shadow across the wall. And in the mirror, Fuang's reflection didn't move like her. It stood first, turned first, and smiled. Fuang felt her body drain. Every thought, every cry, sunk into a murky lake within her mind. No pain, no cold, only one feeling remained. Someone else was replacing her. In the mirror, Fuang, but no longer truly Fuang, tilted her head and whispered, "Finally, it's my turn." Madame Cao, the one who once performed the cleansing ritual, returned just as the moon reached its peak. But the moment she stepped through Fuang's gate, she recoiled, hands trembling, eyes wide. That's not her anymore. That's not Fuang. Inside the house, Fuang stood before the altar, hair flowing. In her hand, Wei's red cord, her voice low, steady, not her own. "I didn't want to possess her, but none of you let me rest. So I'll stay. I'll live the life you all owe me." Madame Cao screamed, "No, possession defies the heavens. The girl won't survive if the spirit stays longer than 3 days." But Fuang turned around, eyes blood red, a crooked smile. "3 days? You think I need 3 days to take it all back?" That very night, the first to die was Mr. Kai, the former village chief, the one who had covered up Wei's disappearance years ago. He was found dead in his living room, eyes rolled back, fingers clutching his shirt like he was begging for his life. On his forehead, deep claw marks, straight to the bone. By morning, the village was in chaos. People rushed to burn offerings, scatter salt at their doorsteps, hang mirrors on their gates. But no one dared mention the name Fuang. They said, "She's not herself anymore." Her mother was the only one who stayed in the house. She didn't speak, didn't sleep. She just sat, watching her daughter, or the thing in her daughter's body, wandering through the halls, whispering to a black cat that no one dared approach. On the second night, Fuang sat in the yard, holding Wei's prenatal record. No wind, a pale moon. She lit a match, burned the pages one by one, muttering, "No more papers, no more proof. No one remembers." But the last page wouldn't burn. It was the DNA result, and it listed Fuang's mother as the legal guardian. Fuang's hand paused, her eyes flickered. It was as if the spirit inside her was hesitating. And then, a baby's cry echoed from beneath the floor. No one had given birth. No children lived there, but the sound was real, muffled, chilling, as if from under the ground. Fuang collapsed to her knees, hands on her head. The crying grew louder, piercing. Then, it stopped. She looked up, her eyes, no longer red, just empty. A child's voice, neither boy nor girl, whispered inside her mind, "Mother has cried enough. Now it's my turn to be called by name." Fuang looked down at her hand, and there it was, a new scratch, the fourth, but not from a cat. This one was small, short, like the nail of a newborn. She stood up, and for the first time, it wasn't a spirit, but Fuang herself, who whispered in her own voice, "Knock An, you never had a birthday for your mother to celebrate." The final day, the blood moon was full, glowing like an unhealed wound. Darkness blanketed Dong Tan. No one dared leave their homes after 7 p.m. Doors slammed shut. Chants murmured behind locked windows. But in the last house of the village, Fuang's house, it was no longer quiet. In the yard, Fuang sat before a pile of dry wood, stacked into a triangle. In the center, the body of a black cat. But no one was sure it was still a cat. Its fur had fallen off in patches. Its eyes dried and sunken. Its belly hollow, as if gutted. But its ears still twitched with every gust of wind, as if it was listening. Fuang wore white, hair loose, her eyes no longer red, no longer filled with fear. She looked calm, but something inside her was breaking. She whispered, "Ms. Wei, if this is the only way to set you free, then I'll burn it. Please spare my mother. Spare this village, but don't make me forget." Her mother stood at a distance, too afraid to come closer. In her hands, a wooden box. Inside, the ashes recovered from the furnace all those years ago. Ashes everyone assumed were old coal. Now, she admitted, they were the remains of Ms. Wei and her 8-week-old fetus. She had never dared to bring them to a temple, never dared to build a grave, just hid them in the shed. Among forgotten things, the fire was lit. The scent of damp wood burned bitter in the air. Ashes swirled. Fuang placed the cat at the center. But the moment she let go, it moved. Her body froze. The village around her seemed to go still. The cat raised its head, one eye blind, the other blood red, but it didn't look at Fuang. It looked at her mother. Then it screamed, not like a cat, but like a newborn baby. Wailing, Fuang's mother collapsed, clutching the box, her voice trembling. I'm sorry. You died unfairly? I didn't mean to. Give it to me." Fuang shouted. She snatched the box, opened it, poured all the ashes into the flames. Then she knelt, bowed 3 times. Each strike of her forehead against the ground echoed like thunder in her chest. Blood streamed down her brow. "Knock An, I'm sorry, my child." The flames roared, towering like a pillar to the sky. The cat thrashed, howled, then fell still. Above them, the moon cracked in two. The wind screamed, then stopped. In that silence, Fuang saw her, Ms. Wei, standing a few steps away. No fire, no blood, just a mother. In her arms, a tiny newborn, red and wrinkled. Both had their eyes closed, but they were smiling. Ms. Wei nodded gently, and Fuang collapsed. Morning, Fuang awoke in her room. Her mother sat beside her, holding her hand, eyes red, face stripped of lies. She whispered, "I'll build a grave for Wei, and for her child, at the head of the village, beneath the Bodhi tree. They won't be nameless anymore." Fuang didn't respond. She walked outside, where the fire had burned. Only gray ash remained. No cat, no trace of remains, only a broken silver necklace, resting quietly in the cinders. 3 days later, a small grave stood at the edge of the village, inscribed, Nguyen T. Wei, died 2007, and her child, Nok An, never born. Fuang laid white flowers on the grave. She smiled, lightly. No cats, no blood, no shattered mirrors, only a cool breeze, and the sound of young birds flying past the Bodhi tree. Some grudges don't rest in graves. Some spirits don't wait for prayers, don't wait for apologies. They only wait for someone to truly remember them. With all the truth, Fuang lived on, but never the same, because some memories, once unlocked, are etched forever in the blood. As for Ms. Wei and the child without a name, they finally had a place to return to. What do you think of this ending? Do you believe that a curse born from a cat's body could bring down an entire generation? If you feel this series deserved to be told to the end, like, share with friends, and subscribe to Shadows in the Night for more spiritual horror stories. Deeper, darker, and hauntingly real. See you again under another moon, when a new curse begins.